Question. With neat diagrams, explain the concept of a reflex system. So, the reflex, a simple English meaning, is something that is directed back or returned. Let us consider the microwave tube image. So, this is a microwave tube. Say we feed this tube with electrons. So, these are the electrons that we are feeding into the tube, and say the other end is closed like this. So what happens is, as the electrons move in this tube, so based on its velocity that it is fed, so there is some velocity at which it is fed, these electrons, what happens is, some of the electrons, they collide in the path, they collide with each other in the path. And the electrons, some electrons, they don't collide, probably they travel farther into this tube, and after a certain distance they all lose energy in the form of heat. Now say we add an electrode. So instead of instead of closing this tube, say we add an electrode with a negative potential at the end of the tube. So we know that electrons are also negatively charged. So what happens is that these electrons, when they travel from this side left to right, these electrons, before reaching the electrode, because of the negative potential, they repel or they reflect back. Okay, because they both are of same polarity, both are negatively charged. And these electrons, when they are returning, they also they go through the same phenomenon. What happens is, when they return, they collide and they slowly start losing energy. Now say what happens, if we add uh, another positive potential grid here on the path. This is called as an acceleration grid in the path. So what happens is, the electrons coming from the electron gun, they pass through this grid, or they are being pulled by this grid, because this is positive potential. Electrons are negative potential. So but since this grid, right, it's not a plate, it's a grid like this. So it has some openings like this, and it has some places like this where the electrons cannot pass. So it's a grid. So what happens is, many electrons which are pulled towards this grid, some of them hit these walls, grid walls, and many electrons pass through this grid holes. Okay, it passes through the grid. So whatever hits the wall, it loses the energy. Whatever passes the grid, that is what we are focused about. So whatever passes through the grid, it moves towards the negative polarity, that is the electrode, at a higher speed, right? Because this grid is positive polarity, it pulls the electrons, and these electrons move faster towards this negative polarity. And as it goes towards the negative polarity, it reflects back, and again those electrons get pulled by this grid, because it is positive polarity. So this process back and forth constitutes a reflex system.